Hey, what's going on, guys? Today on episode 3, we have the awesome opportunity to speak with educator and composer John M. Pasternak. John has written some amazing pieces of music for the concert band realm, and he's starting to dive into the orchestral realm of writing as well. He is an outstanding teacher, and we are going to listen and kind of talk through his process on not only his philosophies of writing, but kind of his process and dissect how he does it and his approach to it, along with some really cool projects that he's currently working on via live stream in the composition world. So stay tuned and listen to an awesome interview with John Pasternak. So this video call was actually done through Zoom, so you might hear a little crackle or something funny in between, but you are still getting exposed to some great content and just some awesome information from an outstanding composer. So stay tuned, listen to John Pasternak talk about what it's like being a composer during these times. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to Music Ed All In, the podcast for music education majors and young music education professionals. Coming at you from Northeastern Ohio, I'm your host, Kevin Neese. It's time to go all in. Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into Music Ed All In, the podcast for young music professionals and music majors. Today we have a super cool moment happening. First on the show, we have our first guest, and I'm really excited to have him here. He's a graduate from Kent State University, and he is a fantastic composer, and he's been published by RWS Music, Carl Fisher Music, Bandworks Applications, Grand Mesa Music, Excelsior Music. This guy has literally done it all. I'm super excited to welcome Mr. John Pasternak. John, thank you so much for joining the show.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Kevin.
I appreciate it. How have things been in the midst of pandemic?
Well, as everyone can probably relate, I'm also teaching in addition to composing. So I am grading a lot of virtual work, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
But I haven't really actually done much composing. I'm pretty much 95% teacher and 5% composer right now.
And the fact that you're still even doing both is pretty spectacular,
Yeah,
despite
I'm
the
trying.
circumstances. And, you know, getting into this podcast in this episode, I was so intrigued by some of the stuff that John's doing right now, and we'll kind of talk about it a little bit more as it goes. But the projects and stuff that you're working on, I'm really interested in, and I think our audience will be interested in too. And another cool parallel that John and I have is I actually work in the same district that John came out of and graduated high school from, Nordonia Hill City Schools. So it's cool to bridge the gap and connect.
Wearing my Nordonia green.
I see. And the bow tie. You are killing it right now, man.
I'm ready.
Awesome.
I'm ready. I got my Nordonia spirit on.
Yeah. So, John, in the, with you going to Kent State, you did bachelor's of music ed first, right?
Yes, I only have a bachelor's.
Okay. And what were the things that got you starting to compose with going for the education degree? What made you start writing?
Well, actually, I went to school to be a composer. I graduated when I went to Nordonia. It's so funny. So this year, before all this happened, I had planned on sharing with my students where I teach a piece called Insignia by Sean O'Loughlin, which I played at Nordonia. In what was called the concert band at the time. I don't know if it still is.
Sure.
But I played Insignia by Sean O'Loughlin in that band, and I just that piece connected with me. I don't know how to describe it. It just connected with me. And around that time, my dad bought a music writing program just out of the blue. My dad knew I liked music, so he bought, it was called Cakewalk, something or other. But
old school, yeah.
Yeah. So he bought me that, and I started this doodling in it, and I realized that I really liked it. Like, I would do that more than I would play video games in high school. So I started doodling around, and I tried to, create things that sounded like Insignia by Sean O'Loughlin. And I finally just started realizing how to create my own voice. Well, time went on. I went to college. I started at Cleveland State University. I transferred to Kent, and I started studying composition real serious at Kent. And also switched my major to education because I had realized that I really wanted to teach. I had done some community bands going through that time as well, and I
Sure.
really enjoyed mentoring and teaching people. So I was like, you know what, I want to be a teacher. So I switched not only schools but my majors, and I love every second of it. And that's kind of how I got started.
That's so cool. And you talked about how you're an educator first and kind of a composer, or it's like you seem to have a really good balance between what you're wanting to write and your passion to teach. And it kind of leads me to ask, when you go to approach writing a piece, do you think more of like education based, like what concepts you might want to cover? Are you inspired by what grade level you want to write for, or maybe a particular event or a project you're working on? What kind of how do you approach that initial writing aspect?
Well, my process through that has evolved over the years. Originally, I used to just have like a subject matter, and I would always think about whatever group. Like in college, I would always write for our concert band, the Kent Concert Band, because that was the group I was in. And Mr. Kerfin was kind enough to humor me by playing some of my works from time to time. So I would always think of what the limitations of that group were, what was strong, what was weak, and I would always try to incorporate that into my writing without ever telling anyone, of course. And I would always try to contemplate that. And so in a way, I was kind of sort of creating my own grade level system in my head. So through that time, I was kind of always like, I think I wrote a piece called Centennial Celebration, which was about, at the time, I think it was the 50th anniversary, or no, it was the 100th anniversary of Kent State University. So
Oh,
I was writing about that. I had to think about that for a minute. But so I wrote that piece that got performed by the university, or the community band, or the concert band. And trying to think, I think that was all we really did. But then I was asked to be staff arranger for the marching band. And so I started, again, coming up with this difficulty level system in my head and what sounded good and that kind of thing. After that, I started teaching. And my first job, they didn't have a lot of music in the library that was necessarily appropriate for the kids that I was teaching. So I
sure.
actually went and created a couple pieces based on their their ability level, and things that I was trying to teach. So I would write music based off of what I was teaching and what we were maybe learning about in the method book at the time. So I was creating our own music for that. Dark Matter is actually the very first piece that I did that was like that. And it wasn't originally called Dark Matter, but it is now Dark Matter.
Sure.
But we went through, and it's also heavily edited from the original version. So it's almost a completely different song, but that's where it started, or a different piece, I'm sorry.
Well,
But so yeah, but that was kind of how that came about.
sure. No, I think it's really cool how, again, not having a music library, that's a challenge. And you're just like, oh, I'll just make one.
Yeah, that was kind of my
Literally.
thought process.
That's awesome. So when you do have that, idea, that inspiration, what you're going to try and write for, what's the process like after that? The timeline, inspirations that you have along the way. What's the process and actually diving into the writing like from there on out?
It depends on the piece of music. I've had music that I've literally sat down and finished the same day I've started it.
Oh, wow.
But I also have pieces that even nowadays I've worked on that they take a better part of a year. It really just depends on what I hear, what I don't hear. Am I thinking of it as I'm composing, or have I already heard it? Trying to think of a good example of one my JFK symphony took me about 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months, and I only finished that after I actually went to the JFK library in Boston and kind of took a tour. And then I don't want to spoil the museum. If you've never been to the museum, you should. But I was actually walking through the museum, and part of it inspired the ending of my piece, and I was just like, that's how it needs to end. And if I never had done that, I probably wouldn't have had any idea of how to do it.
Wow, that's super cool. I've never been to the JFK Museum.
It's really neat. I mean, if you're interested in history, and if you're playing my piece, the JFK Symphony, which is sold through Bandworks Publications, if you're interested, check it out. It's a very emotional piece, but like I said, the place actually inspired, or actually being there and seeing and feeling and hearing what was going on is what finished that piece.
Yeah, I know when I was listening to some of your other stuff, I'm always thinking of like what's going in John's head when this is coming out of people's instruments, because I mean the sounds that you're coming up with, they're really cool, and I think they're very unique. And I was listening, and I actually had the opportunity to play one of your pieces in community band. I played Western Reserve March, which I think is just an awesome piece, and that was one of your earlier ones, right?
That is actually, I think it's my first full concert march, meaning that it how do I word this? It is the first full form concert march I've done. I have
Oh,
one
sure.
march that came out before that, um, called Wave High. Oh, called Wave High the Flag, and it doesn't necessarily follow the traditional march form. Western Reserve follows the traditional American march form.
Sure. And I love just how it's not it doesn't have it has the typical form of a march like you said, but it also has that unique flavor of John. And like there's a tag ending out where it's not, everybody playing a unison note, right? It's like it's on the and or something kind of bizarre,
It
but it
goes
has a cool
one
fit.
and yeah,
Yeah.
one and.
And it's just unique in the quality of sound that you're getting.
That is something I'm trying to make my signature at the end of my marches. Now the thing is I don't want to put them at all of them, but I do want to put them on the end of a couple of them.
Sure. And that's a perfect segue, into one of the next questions I had was like when people say John Pasternak, what qualities of sound would they associate your name with? What do you think what people would, or what would you want people to say?
Well, I'm very, I'm sure Kevin can attest to this. I'm very into writing music for film,
Yeah.
and that's something I'm very passionate about. But something, I mean, it falls on me for not really expressing this. I'm very passionate about sharing that with students as well. I think that I always wanted to write music for film, and I was never given the opportunity until I was literally walking out the door of college. I was given an opportunity to write music for a film with the Kent State Independent Film Program.
Sure.
So something I've been doing in my current district is, looking out for film projects to write music for, and then getting the kids to um, record it. We did a documentary called Save My Park for the Coaster Studios, documentary called Save My Park, which was about an amusement park in Kentucky called Kentucky Kingdom. And I reached out to the director, Tyler. I'm sorry, not Tyler, Taylor. And Taylor was on board with it. And about part of the way through, I happened to talk to our orchestra director, and I said, do you guys have time for this? Are you interested? And he said, yeah, just let me know a date. We'll come up with a timetable. We did, and they recorded it. Our district has asked me now to make a few films here and there. And then, of course,
Very cool.
I'll write the music for it, and then I'll ask our orchestra director if he's got time in the schedule to record it, and we'll usually make it happen.
That's super neat. So you definitely cinematic quality of sound. That's very, very unique.
Yeah.
Um, So
I'm sorry, Kevin. I don't think I answered your question. But
no. I think you absolutely did. That totally answers the question. That's great.
well,
Um,
excellent.
with some of the pieces, the thing that I like about you too, John, is you are an educator and you understand. You want to create music. It sounds like you want to create music that's accessible. You want to create music that's every kid can participate in. And I mean, you write all across the spectrum, grade 1 through whatever. And I actually listened to Belligerence, and I thought that was it's a cool grade 1. It's got that intensity and fire. For I was just thinking of how jacked a middle school kid is probably like, oh man, we get to play Belligerence today.
I talk about that sometimes with my colleagues too, about the piece that when you say, let's get out this, we call it the yes piece. The piece that when you say, let's get this out, and you hear them go, yes.
Yeah.
So I guess sometimes when I'm writing, I do say, I hope this is the yes piece, or I hope this is, I talk about this, and I know we're going to talk about the live streams later, Kevin, so I don't want to
Oh sure.
jump too far, but I do talk about this in the live streams that I've been doing. I have to be sold on something in order for me to feel that someone else will be sold on it. So when I'm writing, if I go, that's good, but I don't think I'd buy it, then
Right.
I know I need to delete it and start over again. Or not even delete it, but maybe even redo it. I have to be able to say, as a band director and as a teacher, one, I'd buy that. And two, I think my kids would like that. Now, that being said, put the band director hat on and take the composer hat off. I have many of times, as a band director, bought a piece of music and I'm going to go, man, this is going to be it. I pass it out and I go, can we please never play that again? So
I think everybody's guilty of that for sure.
I mean, I've had pieces I've gone, this is going to be their favorite piece. They're going to beg to play this at their graduation. And they're like, no, please never.
That's funny.
So, yeah, I've been wrong on that.
It's cool to think, this is your piece of candy piece, and we'll get, fruits and vegetables later, but it's cool that, go in with the mindset of, I love what you said, how if I'm not crazy about the idea, they're not going to be crazy about it. And I think that applies not only to, repertoire selection, but just teaching. Like if you're not excited about it, why would they be excited about it?
Exactly. And that's something else that when I pick the music too, I always, I want to be excited about it. I've when I was a younger teacher, I used to always just pick things to pick. I'm like, oh, well, this will teach that. This will teach that. But then I found by the time concert season came around, those didn't necessarily sound as good because I wasn't bought into them.
Right.
So, excuse me, the ones I was more excited about always sounded better.
Yeah, I think that there's so much truth to that. So when you are selecting pieces and, and you're thinking of writing and doing all of that, because I think they kind of go hand in hand, the stuff that you're going to want to pick might reflect stuff that you want to write. Is there any composers or inspirations in your head that you're like, ooh, I love the sound of this writer, and how they go about it from there?
That's a dangerous question, Kevin. If you would have asked me that about 10 years ago, I could have given you lists because I didn't know the people. now I know them.
Right.
I will not say educational composers I listen to because I don't want to accidentally leave any of them out and offend anyone. But I will say John Williams will always. I own, actually they're behind me on my shelf. I own countless John Williams, like actual his signature series, not like the arrangements of them. I own his signature series scores, and I study those religiously to see even his engraving, his orchestration. Beethoven, Mahler, Shostakovich are three of my favorite composers from the past, and I study their stuff religiously as well.
Yeah, I John Williams, you can't go wrong with John Williams. Like that's the holy grail, man.
There are several living composers out there that are in the education world that I do listen to and I study their things. Again, I'm not going to say their names because I don't want to accidentally leave someone out and I don't want to
No,
offend
you're good,
anyone.
man.
But do know that I do study theirs as well.
So if you're writing, and let's say you hit like a block, do you reach out to those resources, and does that kind of give you that push to move forward? Does it give you potential ideas? Do you kind of reach out to those as you're writing?
Um, I started kind of a friend of mine, Pat Burns on Facebook. He may not remember he said this, but he said this when I very first started not composing, when I very first started getting music published. Uh, he once used to, I think he said once on Facebook, don't stop. It was something along the lines of, if you have writer's block, then you should be arranging, or not even necessarily arranging. You should be transcribing, because there's always stuff that, one, you can learn about engraving, or two, you can be learning about how other people are writing, because the only thing you're really doing is putting notes in a page. You're not necessarily
Right.
using as much creativity by arranging or by orchestrating.
Now, earlier you had said you were actually the staff arranger at Kent, right?
Yep, for a year I was.
Okay. So when you were doing arranging and you were doing stuff for ensembles, and you said you were doing marching band specifically.
Yep.
So, I mean, you're doing lots of pop tunes, and
Mhm.
I mean, you're doing all that. How did you feel about doing that? Was that like maybe a piece of candy for you sometimes too, to just be like, oh man, this is just a fun tune to arrange and play?
There was a lot that were, it was kind of cool the way that Mr. Kerfin uh, organized it. He put a lot of the responsibility on us. Like, it was myself and Cameron Collier, who is a fellow student with me. He called us into his office, and when we got the position, and he said, "Let's pick 4 themes together." And never did anything on that line necessarily by himself. He asked us for what we thought, and I think what we ended up coming up with was, because it was the centennial year of the university, we did a centennial show, we did a Halloween show. I'm trying to think, we did an Earth, Wind, and Fire show, and there was a 4th one, and I cannot think of what it was.
Sure.
But we came up with these ideas by ourselves, and he would occasionally say, "No, we're doing this song," or "No, we're going to do this piece." For those shows, but for the most part, we were completely in charge of all of them.
I think that's cool because I mean you're still getting that creative outlet, not necessarily maybe not the same realm of composition, but you're still getting that opportunity to kind of test the waters out and kind of dive in the deep end.
Yeah, that was really, I mean, and that was, teaching again, as I said earlier, it was kind of like, kind of learning the limitations. Um, Even through that, there was still some limitations. I mean, we did the first show, we would listen to it, we'd hear what went well and what didn't. We'd go back and change things from there. So, I always I told Mr. Kerfman this, that he was a really great composition teacher, because he was one of the first. A lot of my composition teachers focused on the art of composition. He focused with me on the art of making it appropriate for the educational setting. And he gave
Sure,
me a
yeah.
lot of those ideas of, if you gave this to a middle school group, you wouldn't be able to do that. And he was the first one that really threw those ideas out, where my other composition teachers, they were more focused on the craft of composing, not necessarily the educational aspect of it.
So going off of that, is there a particular grade or age group that you enjoy writing for? Something that you're like, oh man, it's just fun for you to do.
I love point 0.5 through 5. I mean, there isn't one that I look forward to more than the others.
Right.
Um, I have a kind of a debate with a couple composer friends of mine. Um, to me, the easier it gets, the more challenging it gets. And what I mean by that is, um, your how do I word this? It isn't that you necessarily are limited, but the there's more rules, if that makes
But
sense.
yeah, it's like the ceiling's definitely lower.
There's more rules to follow, the easier it gets. So there's more, I won't say restrictions is the wrong word, but for lack of a better term, there are way more restrictions to a 0.5 than there is a 4.
Oh yeah, and I mean, when you're in that process, I'm sure it's just I think it's hard to captivate an audience, or to captivate a student, as the grade level goes down, and you're still trying to keep it exciting and driving, where the kid's gonna really attach to it while still following all of those rules. That
Yeah.
grade half is like what, the first 5-6 notes that they know. And
I think it's Dota Law,
sure.
and if I remember correctly, it's only B flat, concert B flat, concert G minor. No, you can't even do G minor, I don't think, because it's literally, like you said, those 6 notes, and that's it.
Yeah, that's incredible that you guys are still able to make, masterful works out of,
Well, that's part of the
just
other
6
challenge
notes.
of it too, is mathematically there's a limit to what you can only do with 6 notes,
Yeah,
certain rhythm patterns. There's only so much you can do, and before you start borrowing from other people.
right. Yeah, I think that's completely valid. And with your, with your writing, is there anything, whether it's grade point 0.5, all the way through 5 plus, whatever, is there anything, any particular composition that you've just been like, wow, that highlights everything that I wanted to establish? It gives, it's kind of like your favorite work that you've done, essentially. What piece is that for you?
So I have kind of a, I hate to say a trick answer to that.
I love trick answers. I'll take
Because
it all day.
I have been asked this question before, um, and this is the answer I always give. Uh, I usually like the music that is submitted now that you all see next year.
So,
That's the stuff that, because it's the freshest stuff. I mean, to
sure.
me, it's like, every year my music knowledge is going like that. And so I always like where this is. Well, next year this is going to be here. And so I'm going to like this. So if you ask me this time next year what's my favorite, it most likely will be none of the ones that have just come out. It'll be the ones that I've submitted that no one will know for another year.
Well, and this is, I think, a seamless transition into the live stream stuff. So currently, John, you are doing a live stream composition. So we are getting to see the stuff that you're working on and hopefully submitting soon. Um,
Yep.
and I've tuned into a few of them, and I really love the idea. And can you explain to our listeners what this live stream composition is like, and what you're trying to accomplish, and what inspired you to do all of this?
It was more so that they can see what goes into writing a piece of music. Um, I did a survey to begin with as to what grade level, what subject matter, what time. I mean, I put out a survey, and we ended up working on this evenings, and it started with Lori Schwartz-Reichel was our moderator, and myself, and we started, oh man, probably about a month or 2 ago, the middle of March. Time has just been blurring by. I don't
Yeah, I
even know
know.
what day. I
In
don't
the
even
midst
know
of all
what
this,
day
yeah,
it
it's
is.
hard to figure out, what day it is, what you ate for lunch, breakfast,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Uh, but we started it with kind of the hopes that people would ask questions or provide feedback, or say, just really make it an interactive thing so people can watch what it's like. And it's mostly stuck to that. And it's growing every stream. I remember the first one, we had 2 or 3 people. Yesterday we had up to 10 or 11 people watching at once, and probably about 5 or 6 people giving comments. So I mean, that it's growing every week, and
Sure.
it's growing every session for that matter. And I know that there's also a few people. We have a gentleman from France that listens every. I call him a next day watcher because he's in bed when we're streaming,
Sure.
so he'll watch it the next day. So but it's built kind of a community. We have some regulars that come. We have people that come every once in a while, and it's become kind of a small community, and it's nice to hear from people and talk music with people. And a lot of composers have also joined. Peter Sciano joins, and Peter knows every time I always say his last name, I say it wrong. I think it's Sciano. Peter Sciano. John Bubbett has started joining us. Tyler Arcari has been there from time to time. Composer Kevin Day was at yesterday's session.
Very cool.
So, I mean, we've had a whole bunch. I've had a few. Lori has been taking Tuesdays off because it's been kind of overwhelming with her schedule to be there both Tuesdays and Thursdays. So every Tuesday I've been having a guest host. Last night we had Jenny Neff. The week before that we had Tyler Arcari was my first guest host. And I'm working on a few for the future. So I'm not quite ready to say who they are yet, but there's a few coming up.
Sure. And the thing that I love about this is, first off, we get to see, what it's like for a composer at work. I don't think sometimes, when we're flipping, whether we're at Stanton's here in Ohio, and you're going through all the stuff and you're just like, oh, well, this is pretty good. And sometimes I think we forget, all of the components that go into writing all of this information and, organizing it to where it sounds correct and it's not, it's grade level appropriate. There's so many factors that you guys have to worry about and consider. And it's so cool to see it happening live in the moment. And
so to go on,
guidance,
Kevin, what you were kind of saying, I realized I didn't say this earlier, and you had asked teed up the perfect question for this, and I didn't say it. So you asked about writing the grade levels. Publishers put out guidelines on their. Excelsior is the only one that I know is public for sure. And in yesterday's live stream, I actually went through a few of the guidelines to talk about, when you're writing, what guidelines and how you follow them and what they're like and that kind of things. I mean, the Excelsior ones are publicly available on their website. So if you're thinking about composing, if you want to be a composer, please look at and this is another conversation in itself. When you're deciding what publisher you want to work with, listen to examples on their website. Go to all of them. Figure out the one that says, my music belongs here. This is where my voice fits best. And then submit things to them, but follow their guidelines. Now, in my personal opinion, and this is not necessarily speaking on behalf of any publisher. I mean, it is not speaking on any publisher's behalf. This is my personal belief. Your first time submitting a piece of music, you should follow the guidelines to the T. Now, they will tell you when you can bend those guidelines and how you can bend them, because they are just that, guidelines. But your very first submission should not break any of those guidelines. They should follow them to the T. Let them tell you what you can and cannot bend and how you can and cannot bend them.
That's really interesting, to see that even composers, I think some people, when, they hear the word composer, they think, like the movie Amadeus, where he's writing and, he just has no limitations and can do whatever the heck he wants. But I mean, there's a lot of structure to what you guys have to do and how to accomplish, across the whole spectrum.
We talked about this on yesterday's live stream a little bit. So a lot of the things in those guidelines, you may think that, oh, what do they know? They're very, very, very well thought out and crafted. So, for example, I was writing a grade 1. In fact, I think it was Belligerence. And I was working on it with Larry Clark when he was at Carl Fisher. This was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Excuse me. When we were working on it, I remember Larry, I had, I think it was an accent with a dot under it. I don't remember if it was a marcato accent or a regular accent, but I had a dot with it. And I remember him saying, this is a grade 1. You have to think about where kids would be in their method book.
Right.
And have they learned that articulation yet? And, they're very well thought out. I mean, if you look at the 0.5 rubric, Excelsior and Carl Fisher, I don't know if Carl Fisher still does, but Excelsior, it's B flat, D, E flat, F, and G in the trombone. There is no C because it's in 6th position.
Right.
So other instruments, like you can still play a written D in the bass clarinet, and you can still play a written a written C in the tuba, but you can't on the trombone because of the physicality of the
Of
level
a
of what you're writing for.
little sixth grader, trying to go for gold and go all the
Yep.
way out to six.
And that's the .5 series.
Right. And I just think it's impressive that you guys are, first off, I mean, I'm sure you refer to those resources all the time, but I mean, you're thinking all of this in the moment as you're putting it on paper.
Well, it's come over a couple years. I mean, Excelsior has been around now for 2-3 years. I think the guidelines have been out for 3 years, but this is their second catalog coming out, and it should be out any day now. The score videos are up on YouTube, but the actual music will probably be sometime in May. So any day they should be available, the second catalog. But the guidelines for after about 3 years, I have most of it memorized. I've started tiptoeing in the orchestra realm, and I will tell you that orchestra rules are completely different. Like band, we think about ranges.
Right.
That is not at all what they think about in the orchestra world. They think about I'm going to say, I won't embarrass myself. I'm still not quite there yet in the terminology, but that's not they would not, the ranges aren't necessarily as important as you would think about with necessarily like a vocal piece or a concert band piece.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're thinking bow strokes. You're thinking everything, vibrato, all that stuff. Yeah, I couldn't even
It's a whole
imagine.
other world, and I'm kind of tiptoeing my way into it. But
well, I'm glad that's
that's
your job and not mine.
it's I've been lucky because I teach at a school that has a string orchestra. So
Yeah.
whenever I have an idea, I run it past one of my two colleagues, and I'll say, "How about this? This piece I have submitted. I won't say it's published because I don't know if it is or isn't yet at this point. But the piece that is submitted for next year was very heavily edited, and a lot of suggestions from my colleague of which I work with. So I'm very grateful for them and their expertise on that.
Well, no, that's cool that you're expanding on your knowledge, and you're trying to push yourself. That's awesome. To try and get into a new realm, as you said.
Well, it's kind of a philosophy, and this is the teacher in me as well. And I've said this to several administrators. I am of the firm belief that I do not know everything, and that I can learn something from just about everyone. And sometimes I need to trip over my own feet to learn, but I am a firm believer in trying to learn, especially from people who are the experts in the subject and the craft of which they're experts in. So.
Yeah.
I try to learn from them.
That's awesome. And this is, kind of leading to our other live stream talk. So you're starting a new live stream series on Sibelius, and
that
I'm
starts
curious
tonight. Will this be out by the time that comes out?
No, unfortunately not. This is going to be posted on Sunday, so they'll get to dive in. They'll get to be there for session 2 of it. So this Sibelius, what is, what's the purpose of it? What are you trying to accomplish, and what are people going to get out of it?
Well, since the stay-at-home orders have been coming out, I've noticed on both Twitter and Facebook, a lot of people are composing and arranging a lot more than they used to, and a lot of them are picking Sibelius. And that's what I feel I have the expertise in, and I've decided to offer it. Any questions they have, I'll be there. It can be as little as how do you set up a score. See, because originally I was going to come up with like a video series, and I was going to do like a tutorial video on them.
Sure.
I bought a program to be able to do that, and I started putting it together, and then I kind of had kind of a conflict with it. I was like, where do I start? Do I start with, go back to the very beginning of this is how you set up a score? Sure. Am I insulting people's intelligence by starting that far back? Should I be focused? Where do I start was basically the argument I had. And so after coming up with all this stuff, I started the first episode. I was probably about 90% done editing it. And it was literally just that, how to set up a score. And I was just like, you know what? People hopefully will know how to do this. And if they don't, you know what? I'll just do it live and they can watch then. So
I think there's so much to live. I mean, and I'm sure, you're experiencing it now, teaching during the current situation with COVID-19. And there's it's awesome to do, pre-recorded material because, a person can click on it, look back at it and do all of that. But I think, getting those real educational moments happening live in the moment, I think is something that sticks with us more. And I think they gain more out of it, truthfully. So I think the fact that you are doing this, Sibelius user live stream, I think I like it better that way personally. That's just me though.
I am hoping that this is going to be beneficial, and for people to be able to ask their questions and me to be able to answer them.
Again, I'm glad that you have that job and I don't. So, and I think this is kind of a great time to ask you. Had said, with you working on different projects and stuff now, um, with this live stream that you've been doing lately, and I'm sure you have some other projects in the works as well. Is there anything that's about to come out that you are, getting really, really excited about?
My new music for 2020 is coming out.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm excited about that. That comes out. They're not on my website yet. I'll be releasing a new version of my website when they come out, which I've spent a lot of time on. So the new version of the website will have the new music when it's all out and about, which should be sometime next month.
Excellent. And if people are trying to tune into the John Pasternak experience, what are some of the best places for them to get a hold of you and check out all the great stuff that you're doing?
Well, you can check out my website, johnpasternak.com. It has all the latest. Again, it's going to have a new website here soon. The old one is still there. You can, on my contact page, if you have any questions for me, you can send me an email. All my social media is there, including YouTube. The YouTube Tuesdays and Thursdays, the time switches for the live streams. I try to post the schedule, or I've started this week posting a schedule for the live streams a little bit ahead of time. So that is now on my Facebook, and you'll see the schedule. I'll post it every probably Monday or Sunday. But Tuesdays and Thursday will be composing days, and Wednesday will be How to Sibelius days.
Excellent. Well, this has been a real treat for me getting to talk with you and just kind of pick your brain apart, as an educator and composer. I think it's super valuable for people to see kind of the other side and understanding what you guys have to go through on a daily basis and what contributions you're, making to the field now that we're in the current situation of COVID-19 and all of that. But I think this has been really, really insightful for me. And this has just been a lot of fun, plain and simple.
I was just talking to one of my colleagues yesterday. He was talking about how he's going to be presenting at Midwest this year, which I'm super excited for him. But I was telling him, one day I want to come up with a presentation to do at Midwest or OMEA. So maybe I'm onto something with these live streams.
I love it, man. The fact that you're able to get to see it happen in real time, and I'm sure it's cool for you as a composer just to see, it happening in the moment, what people think of what you wrote, and you're getting that instant feedback. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that can happen with it.
I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's been a good time.
You should be. And I know I've had a lot of fun with it, and I've been tuning in. And if you get the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, you should, because you get to see not only the composition process, but you get to see these people are as they're human beings. and I know sometimes it seems like their computers just, spitting out music, but you get to see a lot of the personality that these people have that are, working with John and John working on this project. It's really, really a cool experience.
I've had some really talented. Well, so far I've had one composer and two teachers on with me, and the two teachers I've had on, it's interesting hearing their perspective as teachers when doing the live stream, and then it's been really cool and interesting having the another composer on with me to hear his perspective.
Again, if you are interested in tuning into these live streams, Sibelius live stream is on this evening. What time is that again, John?
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock on Wednesdays is the How to Sibelius.
8 o'clock on Wednesdays, which is super awesome. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, ladies and gentlemen, check out John Pasternak, composer, educator, extraordinaire, killing it, doing all these great things in music education. And we look forward to hearing what more he has to offer the music ed world. Thanks so much, John, for tuning in.
Before we go, since Kevin said all these nice things about me, before you should all know this, Kevin is a very talented music educator, one of the kindest people you'll ever meet. His stuff he's doing with the band of which I graduated from, although before your time. But
A little bit, just a little bit, man.
he's doing great things there, as well as the other director. They're doing great things in that program. So keep up the good work with yourself.
Thanks, man. I'll take that to the bank. I appreciate that. Well, you heard it from John Pasternak. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Take it easy.
Bye, everyone.
Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. If you liked this video, please feel free to subscribe. If you're more of a visual person, feel free to subscribe right on YouTube. If you're more of just wanting an audio, if you're that person that likes to ride in their car, be sure to check out Buzzsprout, iTunes, and Spotify. If you like to email, feel free to email musiced.allin@gmail.com. Don't forget to like the Music Ed All In Facebook page for updates, trailers, and more. Take it easy, gang, and always go all in.